Welcome back for the last session of the Setting Your Financial House in Order seminar. It's been great to have you guys here, and all you by internet, we're glad to have you again today. We're going to wrap this up today. We're going to talk about 2 or 3 different things. We're going to talk about financial freedom or financial security, and then I'm going to teach a session on how to make good decisions. Has anybody ever made a bad decision? We'll cast the lying demon out of the rest of you right at the end of this service. So we're going to learn how God's taught me and in our businesses how we make good decisions, some of the things that we think about, how we go about doing that. I learned this, church. A bad decision can cost you a lot, and it can take you a while to get over it. And so I'd rather spend the time up front to make good decisions. So we're going to talk about doing that. But let's talk about financial security or financial freedom. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I had a great father. He's gone on to be with the Lord, but he was, I'm one of those guys that has no excuse, right? I had a father who showed leadership, who worked hard, who taught me to work, who taught me the Word of God. He was a leader in the church. He was a worship leader. He's a great guy, and he's the greatest soul winner that I've ever known, one-on-one evangelist. He's led people to the Lord literally all over the world, all over the country. But my dad was born and raised during the Depression. And he was drafted into World War II at 18 years of age. Didn't even get to finish high school. They took him out of high school to put him into the war. That was the way it was done at that time. But my dad, by the time I came along and began to understand some things, my dad's security was what he thought was financial security. In other words, son, we need to work hard. You need to find a good company to work for. You need to be loyal to them for your entire life. You need to do more than is expected of you. And at the end, mate, you'll retire and everything will be great. And that was how he came out of the Depression in World War II. That was his thought process. You work as hard as you have to work to stay out of poverty. He was one of 9 children and understood poverty, went to bed hungry during the Depression. He tells a great story about my grandmother. She's quite a character. I remember her. And she was pretty tough to intimidate. And my grandfather was a hunter, and he would go out and hunt. He had these dogs, go coon hunting with dogs. I know y'all probably never done that, but down in Texas, that was a big deal. These guys would run all night long. When he was 82, 83 years old, I couldn't even keep up with him running through. This guy was amazing. But he loved these hunting dogs a little too much. And so during the Depression, the story was that he would come back with dog food for these dogs from town, and her babies were going to bed hungry. So she informed him, you bring that dog food home one more time without feeding my children, and I'm going to take this 12-gauge shotgun and shoot every one of those dogs. He did and she did. So, can you imagine living in that kind where really the choice was between feeding the dogs or feeding her children. That was real to them. So security became a huge issue. And that's what my dad taught me. So he had a mindset of financial security. So in the 1980s, when the opportunity came to me to start Global, the first company that we own, I was vice president for a fairly large corporation making a lot of money during the 1980s. And my dad, can you imagine a guy who has this mentality and who has lived this way all of his life, and he made a good living, that wasn't it. But here his son is going to give up this job, because the truth is he was living through me a little vicariously, right? And so here I am going to give up this job, and he thought I was nuttier than 10 run-over ducks. He was like, what are you doing? Because I told him, I was honest with him, I said, I don't even know if I'll be able to pay myself the first year. I'm starting this thing. And look, what I taught yesterday, guys, about being out of debt, if my wife and I, she's not in here yet, I think she's coming. My wife and I got out of debt during the 1980s and got ourselves in financial shape. There's no way I could have started Global, because in the world of employment, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute, in the world of employment, debt puts you in bondage. You can't give up your job to go start a business because you can't stop paying your debt. Can't stop paying for what your lifestyle you built up. So what we had done was we put ourselves in a position that so that when the open door of opportunity, which God brought to me, was there, I could walk through it. Do you know the truth really is, if I'd had a financial security mindset, if I had been in debt, living like everybody else I knew was living at the time, we lived in a little $30,000 three-bedroom house in the 1980s, making $150,000 a year. In the 80s, that was a lot of money, guys. I drove a second-hand car that I paid cash for. I mean, and you know, the guys that knew me well, they thought it was funny. I'd go to lunch with them and make fun of me. But I'm the guy that owns Global now. Where are they? I mean, I'm not bragging about that. I'm just telling you, God honored it, guys. So here's what would have happened. If I hadn't have done those things, when that open door of opportunity came, I don't even think I would have recognized it, much less walked through it. Because my first thought would have been, I can't not pay myself for a year and go do that. How's that going to work? And you know, literally that's what happened. It was 13, almost 14 months before I ever got a paycheck. The whole first year that I ran Global, I paid my own travel expenses out of my savings. That's what it takes. And that's not pleasant, guys. It's not easy on your family. At the time, I had children in school. But God had blessed us. We were able to save enough money, get out of debt. So here's the difference I want you to see. You can have a financial security mindset, but to me, that's not scriptural. I'll tell you why. It's self-centered. It's me, my four, and no more. You know what? And my dad didn't mean this. This wasn't his intent. But what he was basically teaching me to do was, we take care of us. We don't give, you know, he gave, but we don't help a lot of people. We don't really be too concerned with how they're going to be able to make it in this world. If they're going to have financial security, it was just about us. And so in that process, he got pretty upset when I did this. But being a good guy like he was, I'll tell you what happened. About 12 years later, he lived long enough to see the peak success of Global. And he had a stroke and he was disabled at the time. He could walk and do all that, but he was somewhat disabled. But he loved nature. He loved the outdoors. So I rented one of these big 40-foot RVs, and we just took off for 3 weeks. This is about a couple of years before he passed away. So we're going all over the country and going to these birds. He loved birds. He was a bird watcher. Went to these bird sanctuaries, you know, and pull into these RV camps. And, you know, I'm setting up the RV, and my mom and my wife are doing laundry, and he's got a little family of 4 leading them to Jesus out in front of the RV. I mean, that was the way he did things. So we're driving down the freeway one day on this vacation, on this trip. And we're not talking about anything, just he and I sitting up front. And he said, son, you remember when you started Global, what a difficult time I gave you, how upset I was about that? I said, yeah, I kind of remember that, Dad. I said, you know, because let me tell you something. At the time, I'm not going to make out like I was some, you know, I just walked right through that. And I respected my dad. It shook me a little bit. I was tempted to be shaken by that. Can we just be real? But he said to me, he said, I just want you to know before I go on to be with Jesus, I just want you to know one thing. He said, I was wrong. And he finally understood, because he'd heard me teach about financial freedom, and he said, I wish I'd known this at 20 years old. I wish I'd understood this at 20 years old. Well, you know what, guys? There's a difference between financial freedom and financial security. A big difference. And financial freedom is where God wants us. He wants you to be able to give when the need's there. You know, we've already talked about this. I'm not going to reteach it. But let me tell you why people don't have, when God speaks to you to give $500 and you don't have it, it's because you've already spent it. We've got a plan to do these things. We have to have a system to do these things. We need to set our lives up, arrange our lives, and manage our lives so that we can do what the Word says. Now, none of us are perfect at it, but start. Start that direction. Go that way and see what happens. The blessings of God are just incredible. They'll chase you down, take you over, tackle you. They're going to get you if we'll just do it God's way. So financial freedom and financial security has to be understood for us to be able to follow what God says in His Word. Now let's look at something. There are 4. Now I know you know these things. This is not informational. This is to get you to think about them for a little bit, okay? I know you know these things. There are 4 ways to produce income. You can be employed. How many people ever had a job? Okay, jobs are good. Say jobs are good. Okay, you have income. We've already talked about level 1 income, and it comes from a job. You can see this guy, he's kind of, my daughter did that. He's kind of laying with his head over on the desk like he's got some problems. But you can be self-employed, you can be a business owner, or you can be an investor. That's the 4 ways that you're going to, and yesterday when we talked about levels of income helps you understand this a little better. But in employment, here's what I want you to see. In employment, an employee earns money by working for someone else. Self-employed people make money by working for themselves. A business owner produces money with a business system. How many third-year business class students now understand business systems? Business systems run businesses and people run systems. Every successful business out there, that's the way it works, guys. An investor produces money with money. Some people enjoy being employees, others don't. Some people like owning companies but don't want to run them. Now, there's all kinds of psychological things that go into this. Some people don't want the responsibility. They'd rather just work for somebody, take their paycheck, and go home. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with any of these things. Some people like owning a company and also enjoy running it. Some people like being self-employed because it gives them control. Some people love to invest their money while others only see the risk of losing it. Now, let me tell you something about self-employed folks. I come from a rural area in Texas where you have a lot of this. Independent, redneck cowboys, right? They can't work for anybody. They work for somebody else for 10 minutes and the whole thing blows up, right? I mean, these guys are a different breed, let me just tell you. And they have to do their own thing. And you know, down there, you know, they all kind of, it's kind of like a herd. They follow each other. They're either welders or they're, you know, they can't come up with anything creative. I'm not being ugly about them. I love them. My brother-in-law is one of them, right? But, you know, here's what they finally realized after about 3 or 4 years of this wonderful self-employment. They're trapped. If they don't go to work, they don't get paid. They can't take a vacation unless they save up the money and take the time off, and then